This is an ultimate global podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.
Welcome again to this interesting series of episodes that we haven't touched for a while now. And it's a special series of episodes that we are covering for startups and different entrepreneurs that are in Australia and around the world. I know we have interviewed a lot of CEOs and co-founders and founders on this podcast and might be knowing a lot of them. But the topic for today's episode is more around innovation and entrepreneurship and how it's evolving in the Australian landscape. I know this is a topic of interest for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, especially during times where the economy hasn't been that great, not only for startups, but I think in general, the economy has been tough in 2024 due to different reasons. For Australia, it's a mixture of domestic and international reasons, which we can definitely talk about. But we want to talk more from a startup's point of view on what they can do in the next 1 year to cope up with that in a better way in that tough economy. Because it's not going to be tough all the time. It's going to be better as well in the coming future. So, Anne, before we start off discussing on the topic, do you want to quickly introduce yourself to our guests? Because a lot of them might be knowing about you, but a lot of them might not know about you. So on to you, introduce yourself, and then we'll kick it off from there.
Sure. So I've been around for a long time. I probably cut my teeth on tech startup entrepreneurship maybe 15 years ago. But my life has really been intrapreneurship. So I've worked for other people and I've been that entrepreneur or that disruptor within organizations. So, and my journey's taken me really to strange places. So my first job out of uni was a policy advisor to the Minister for Immigration in the Hawke Keating government, a guy called Clyde Holding. And then, I ended up working for a lot of Liberal members of parliament and ministers, including Gladys Berejiklian, Maurice Payne, Andrew Constance, and my last stint was senior policy advisor to Karen Andrews, who was the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology. So I've had a very different exposure, I guess, if you like. Within all of that, I became a venture partner with Significant VC, which looks at deep tech and university-related startups, and also was the co-founder with Annie Parker and Nikki Williamson of Techfugees Australia. So we were running hackathons for refugees. Fast forward all these years and I'm thinking, nothing's really changed. All the problems are still there, except they're sort of getting bigger. So I work a lot with uni students. I build stuff with uni students as part of capstone projects. And they've all graduated now and they've all got high distinctions in computer science. But wait for it, they're struggling to find work. So I'm like, what on earth is going on in Australia? So I guess the theme of everything that I've ever worked on is I'm a real advocate. So whether I'm in a minister's office or in a government department or in a not-for-profit or in a corporate, I do very much query how we can't look after people better. So there is also a theme of social impact because I always am so exposed because of the work that I've done to the problems. Innovation in this country is always struggling. Startups are always struggling. And one of the things that I guess I realised working in federal government and then more recently just working on my own startup is that we are not very good at nurturing good ideas and everyone's working in a silo, right? And that's kind of a really big problem because innovation doesn't come from working in silos. In my honest, humble life work opinion, and I am 58 years old, so I've really been in the workforce for 35, 37 years. I just kind of see that, we've just got we can do these things a lot better, right? Like none of this stuff is hard. And one of the things that I will never forget is a guy called Paul Shetler that was brought out by Malcolm Turnbull to run the Digital Transformation Agency. And you can Google him. But one of his big statements was at conferences and things was that you want to support startups in Australia, open up government procurement to startups. Businesses will scale in Australia if you did that. The other thing, not so much Paul's point of view, but my point of view, going back to this silo thing, is that we cannot solve problems in silos. And what we need is industry to work a lot better with universities and entrepreneurs to actually invest in the problems that are being solved. So, you know, that's kind of my journey and my observations over time. And the work that I've done really shows that, you know, we need to collaborate, or as someone mentioned at an event that I was at, we need more coopetition. So we need competitors to collaborate because we are too small. This country is way too small to try and, you know, scale things while we're all competing with each other. But we can scale here if government opens up its doors and starts procuring from small business and startups.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point of working in silos. And this is something which I've also observed in a lot of other countries. And as you said, Australia is very small to think about it. Is it something which is more of a culture-driven thing, or because startup culture wasn't very it's not a very established thing in Australia, right? You know, we all used to talk about the startups in the US and the San Francisco, but talking about the startup system in Australia has probably been like 10 years old, where people actually started off thinking of having a startup ecosystem, and that's where these kind of big units like Fish Burners, UTS startups, UNSW founders,
Yes,
Startmate. We've interviewed the CEO of Startmate as well on this podcast, Michael Batko. And these kind of people, they started to pick up like 10 years ago. So it wasn't very well established before that. Do you think it's because of the immaturity of that startup ecosystem that this problem is being faced?
I think it's the banging on about tech startups, right? Because, you know, we've had entrepreneurship in this country from the year dot, right? So it's not that we don't have that. And I think of the migrants, right? I'm a migrant to this country. My parents migrated here from Egypt. I was 7 years old, arrived here in 72. So, you know, I remember just seeing so many migrants not able to get work, started their own businesses and started the, you know, the big market gardens out in southwest Sydney, which no longer exists, which were the food bowl of New South Wales. You know, I mean, necessity is the mother of invention, and entrepreneurship is not always about technology. Technology is a great enabler, but we really have to put it in its place. It's not the be all and end all, and tech startups are clearly not the be all and end all. And one of the things that I do observe going to a lot of events and, you know, co-working spaces is there's people that are designing solutions that no one has a problem with because they want to be the next unicorn. You know, and I think, you know, one unicorn that I adore in this country is Melanie Perkins with Canva, because she took 100 meetings and she was rejected 100 times just in Australia before she went overseas and got rejected more. And then the rest is history. But consider any one of us going through 100 rejections and still going, right? So it's about resilience, actually. That's what's going to make the difference between you and me and someone who's actually succeeding. How much do they want to do it? You know, there's also been this massive reliance, you know, again, because of this tech startup ecosystem on, you know, venture capital and investment and all of that. It's like, you know, I've worked for venture firms. I am a venture partner. People want to know how you're making money without asking for money. Where's your traction? And no one is prepared for that. Oh, well, yeah, we've tested blah, blah, blah. But no, just go out and get paying customers and prove that people want this product. You know, Disruptors Co. talks a lot about this, the product market fit, you know, and people don't really understand that because They have an idea and they want to be cool or whatever, but that's not how you solve problems. That's not how you, improve things. Now, I do have a bias, a very huge bias for lived experience founders. Lived experience are people that understand the problem, like Melanie understood the problem with graphic design not being democratized, and her being able to charge schools for all these templates when she's thinking, why can't schools and small businesses do this for themselves? But she wasn't someone just trying to make money out of something. She really understood the industry and she understood its limitations. Having said that, I will say I cannot believe it doesn't have spell check. Like, it kills me that it doesn't have spell check. Like, hello. But I digress. That's not important. At the end of the day, it is an Australian unicorn. And she already had paying customers through her original work. And she did validate that. But still, I think there's an over-reliance on getting investment and, what do you need the money for?
Yeah. I think the story of Canva is a very rare one. We always talk about it. And it's always given as a really good example to showcase to a lot of founders, not only in Australia, but globally, on how you can raise money in such a short time with a very sharp vision that she had. But before I pass it on to you, Anne, I want to bring in George as well to this discussion. So, George, what do you think about the points that we have discussed till now? And do you want to add something to the topic today in terms of the innovation entrepreneurship, considering you yourself is running your own venture, consulting venture for so many years now?
Yeah, look, I think there's some valid points that Anne-Marie has made. I feel to a degree, though, in the past, I think the venture capitalist in Australia has been more like a vulture capitalist than a venture capitalist. Not all of them, let's be fair, not all of them, but I've worked many years with inventors and tried to get their inventions into the marketplace. And I think Anne-Marie, your statement is fine and relevant when it's relatively easy to have the product created. If I come up with a new widget and it's going to cost me $5,000 or $10,000 to build the widget, and then I can sell that widget and get a return on it fairly quickly, terrific. But I've come up with a brand new product that needs plastic molding. To get the die done for that is a minimum of $40,000. To do a production run of that is a minimum of $10,000 or $15,000. So and I know you're not suggesting this, Anne-Marie, but if I take you at your word for word, you're saying just because I'm clever and I come up with an idea that requires $55,000, or George suck eggs, go and find it and go and sell it first. And I know that's not what she's suggesting. So what we need to do is we need to have a way where we can support more people that are creative. And talking about the creativity and the innovativeness of this country, I'm old enough to remember the Hills Hoist.
Yes.
The Victor lawnmower. Now, the Victor lawnmower went off overseas because we couldn't afford to do it here. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think maybe the Hills Hoist did too originally. So we've got this wonderful Labor government at the moment that initially was talking about anybody that goes to university, we'll sort you out, but we're not going to sort out people that go to TAFE. And then they got called out on it, and then they said, okay, well, we'll hang on. We'll do the university and we'll do the TAFE. What about doing the inventors? What about actually solidly investing in inventors? Why is it if I choose to go to university and do a course, I can rack up 60, 70, whatever, $100,000, and the government says to me, I tell you what, Georgie, when you start to make a quid, then you pay. But if you never make a quid, you don't have to pay it back. George Mavros goes up and says, hey, I'm an inventor, and this could give clean water to all the Aboriginal people that are suffering out in the middle of Australia. Yeah, well, you got to compete for this. This could bring electricity to communities that don't. Yeah, well, you got to go and sort that out yourself. Okay, I'd like to do a degree on the advancement of solar energy in Australia, and that's going to be a master's degree, and it's 100,000. You go for it, son. There you go. Off you go. We'll pay for it.
Yeah,
that's the problem in this country. This country doesn't understand and hasn't for many, many years. Inventors are just as valuable, and in some cases more valuable than uni students. And
that's
so
right. And
you know how much I support uni students.
And the Labor government, unfortunately, has decimated any program that was there to actually fund innovators. And the thing that sort of just blows my mind is that the boosting female founders, which I was involved with when I was working for the minister, that was the first program, and I think the last program, that invested in a lot of migrant, Aboriginal, regional women, right? Yep. Because when I arrived in Canberra, they had done Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane consultations, and I said, no, go back and go out. And so I remember we were so excited, the very first lot of women that got funded. And what people forget is it wasn't a funding program, it was matched funding. So if a woman got 800,000, it's because she had 800,000 in her bank account. And that has just gone. It's gone. Khalas, finished. It's just, somewhere else now. It's like that money's gone somewhere else because it was in the forward estimates.
Yep.
So, things like that are really... So I agree with you. We do need someone to invest in ideas, and there's been some attempts. I don't know if you remember, in New South Wales, Mike Baird had a really great program called the Premier's Innovation Initiative, and he got all the departments to say, these are our pain points, and then everyone had a chance to contribute. I have no idea what happened to it, probably nothing, because you leave it to the public service to administer something like that, and it's an oxymoron. They can't do innovation. They just can't deal. So and it breaks my heart, because when the last year that I was with Karen, before she moved on to the other portfolio of Home Affairs, I had said, we have got a distributed ecosystem. We actually need to stop thinking that we need to have all these places because Australia is too big. But what we need to do is build on and have the states fund early stage, and then let the Commonwealth help with scale. Right. And start to put in measures around, procurement for startups and small businesses. And there was something called the Business Research Innovation Initiative. I don't know what's happened to that, but that was, getting departments to own a problem. But the Department of Industry was paying for people to come in and solve that problem in a really innovative way. And my view was the departments should be paying for it, because they're going to go and pay KPMG anyway, at the end of the day, and spend that money. So, what I've always realized is money is not the problem, because there's plenty in the system. It's just not in the right places, hitting the right mark. And government seems to have retreated. A Labor government has retreated from a lot of the programs, whether they were great or not. They have retreated from a lot of programs that were providing that funding so people didn't have to go to venture straight away. And you still need to validate, right? You ultimately, the validation is what I'm talking about. And yes, you're right. There are people that need $100,000 to hire that big tech person that's going to build the technology and things like that. But still, you have had to have had a conversation with someone to say, if we get this done, how much would you pay for it? And why do you think this is amazing and it's going to change your life? sort of situation. And we don't do that, you know, because I've seen it. I've seen people say, oh, no, we have no competitors, which is also a big warning sign. Like, okay, not even lateral, not even semi competitors, not even in a pink fit competitors. That's crazy. But people tend to, you know, not really think about those things in the right way and then shoot themselves in the foot, because venture, you know, even venture has to see a return. They have to see that there's going to be a return. Now, having said all of that, we forgot Milk Run because somehow those guys got so much money and they failed. And now everyone says, oh, yeah, but they won. Look, I like them because you know what? They changed the landscape, and it means you and I can now get cheaper than the stupid Woolies delivery, right? They created a competitive tension. But if you have a look at how much money they got, how fast they got it, and how quickly they failed, and how they had 0 people on their board with fast-moving consumer goods experience. So they were building warehouses everywhere like they were the next Woolworths. Like, no kids. I mean, that's not even my area, but I can tell you that's not sustainable. They should have partnered with IGA or Aldi or something, you know. But, you know, there you go. Like, you know, but it did change something, right? So I know that also what we have to do is sometimes go, okay, maybe a lot of money went into it. Maybe it was not successful in the standard, but if it changed the landscape and it disrupted the landscape and made things better for a consumer, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, even if you look at EMDG, Export Marketing Development Grant.
Yeah.
Now, what is and this is not about a Labor government bashing thing. It's not even about a Labor and a Liberal bashing. It's just a statement of fact.
Yeah.
So EMDG has been around for Labor, Liberal, and whatever.
Yep.
But what is EMDG about? Well, EMDG is about saying to a young, not even a small Aussie company, listen, mate, we'll give you a hand. You go off overseas and you're going to expand the market, and you can grow, and you can actually bring money into our country and all of that. Oh, thanks. How do I do that? Well, you go off and spend all the money first. And then when you've spent all the money, you then come back to us at the end of a year and you tell us how much you've spent, and we'll let you know if we're going to give you all that money or not. So, okay. So what I do, I don't have money to go overseas. You're going to help me to go overseas, provided I have money to go overseas before you give me money to go overseas. It's stupid, right?
And you know who it disadvantages? It disadvantages people that don't have money.
Correct.
So here we go again. Even the match funding, I would argue.
They give it back to you. If I damn well had the money to spend freely half the time, I wouldn't be talking to a government.
Yeah.
So do you think, so one thing that I can really pick up here, Anne, is the lack of, that you said before as well, lack of cooperation or collaboration between different entities and different stakeholders in the startup space. So what are those 1 or 2 things, according to you? You already touched upon some of them, but what are those 1 or 2 things that's really going to foster that collaboration the next 1 year? Because we are having a federal election coming up. The government might change, might not change. We don't know about that. And then we are also having economy. It's not a very good shaped economy at the moment. But again, they are saying that there can be different kind of predictions that you can make about 2025. And some of them say that the dawn is on the horizon, and we might see the interest rates coming down and all those fancy things that we have been hearing from the Reserve Bank of Australia for quite some time now. So considering all those predictions, what do you think can be some of the steps that this industry can take to foster innovation in the next 1 year?
I'm going to be controversial and say we actually need an advocacy body that advocates for startups, because we actually do not have that in this country. So that's a real problem, because we don't have a seat at the table, right? So Tech Council, AIIA, ACS, no judgment, they're representing whoever they're representing, but they are not fighting for startups and the funding that's been withdrawn from startups over the last few years at the state and federal level, right? And it doesn't matter what government's in place, right? We know it doesn't really matter. So, you know, my thing is that we have to grow up because we have matured, as George said, like, and as you've said, like, we have matured over the last decade or 2 decades. You know, there were very few people in this space. Now it's a whole ecosystem. But we need to grow up and we need to think about how we're going to, you know, have an advocacy body that will advocate for us and push things, because we are not even at the table to say to Ed Husick or Bill Shorten or whoever, hey, allocate money from every department to start up solving problems, right? 10% of every budget, you will not believe, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, right? And, you know, we can't have those conversations because, you know, you've got Tech Council advocating for big tech, which are its members, and rightly so. So that's why when I jump online and I say I've got 5 or 6 students that have graduated with high distinctions in computer science and they're struggling to get a job, and people are like, what? Like, how is that possible? And I'm like, yeah, well, how is it possible? That's the truth. But Tech Council keeps saying that they need to bring in more people from overseas. So go figure. And our own Australian kids, right? I work with children of migrants because that was, you know, that was me. So they're all really struggling. You know, my star student, I went to see her the other day. She's working at Liverpool Hospital, right, as a wards person, right? Like, what the F, Australia? Like, come on. So I really think that's a problem, because if we don't have a seat at the table, no one's advocating for these things. And no one's saying, well, sure, Tech Council has a right to advocate for its members, but who's advocating for us? ACS is not advocating for us. AIIA is not advocating for us. So it's a real thought, you know, because I know politics. I know politics probably better than I know startup, because I've spent all my life in politics. And that's, you know, we're not going to have a seat at the table if we're seen as irrelevant. And clearly we're seen as irrelevant because a whole ton of stuff's being done to us and withdrawn from us without any conversation. Like, even when the Labor government came in, both state and federal, they both did a global pause on all their funding programs, and these were the matched funding. Do you understand what that meant for people that had borrowed 80K or 100K or 200K and had to sit on it while the departments decided to do a review of whether they were going to even have the money to give people? Like, that is just disgusting. I'm sorry. It's so not in our interests. So it really does come back to, how do you get people working together, and how do you get startups working together and stopping the silos and acknowledging, sure, all these other industry associations are there, but who is standing up for us, the people that are doing 10 side hustles while we're trying to build a startup, because we're not high net worth individuals. And, you know, we're trying to make a living while we're building something that we think is going to make a difference. I don't know. That's my view.
Did you have anything to say on that, George?
I was just going to say that I think collaboration is an opportunity, and I think that if we can get people to understand that you may be opposition in a certain area, there may be some aspects of your offering that sits over the top, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't actually collaborate together and you both bloom and you both grow. If you imagine the tyre manufacturer seeing the wheel rim manufacturer as a competitor rather than a collaborator, we would never have car tyres and wheels. We'd still be back in the dark ages.
Yeah.
I, as you know, Sarab, I had a couple of charities. Now within my charity work, I just donated some gear to one charity. I spoke on behalf of another charity today, and I donated some gifts for a fund raffle for a third charity, and we've donated some products for a fundraising day for 18 charities. Now, we're out trying to get a quid. We need a quid for our charity. But that doesn't stop us actually working with other charities, because as a very good friend of mine says, she says, my arms aren't big enough to wrap them around everybody, so I want to help somebody to help those that I can't help personally. And I'm of that same mind. So when you're a startup and you're struggling for this and you're struggling for that and you're doing this and you're doing that, if, instead of being so insular and so worried about somebody getting ideas or stealing your idea or whatever, if you can find somebody that you can collaborate with and you share resources, that won't solve every problem that we're talking about and raise today, but it's another way of doing it. It's also, if I go back to when I was a food broker, if I go back to when I was an agent and distributor before the days of internet, I would seek out people in other states of Australia that did exactly what I did.
Yeah.
Exactly what I did.
Cool.
And I would share ideas with them. And at one stage, I had me in Sydney. I had a chap in Auckland. I had a guy in England, and I had a guy in Perth. And what we used to do, we used to write proposals and packages together for any one of us. And if you look at the time differentiation between London, Auckland, Sydney, Perth, we could basically work through the night between us by getting up a little bit earlier, staying back a bit later, and pass it on. And we were of a similar mindset. Now, I didn't worry about some of my creativity that I put into that proposal being stolen by the guy in Perth, nor did he worry about the guy in London. I understand because of the internet and all that sort of thing, people think it's a bit close now and you could steal my idea and that. Seriously, I'll give you my chocolate cake recipe. I'll give you 100 chefs to make it. It will taste different.
Yeah.
And so I think if startups and innovators and creators can think a little bit more about sharing ideas rather than siloing ideas, that will also help.
And how do we foster that sharing of ideas? I think these kind of platforms really help you to do that. The podcasts are a great way to share ideas with each other. When you share information on a podcast, it goes out to the rest of the world. You're kind of spreading awareness, and you are instigating a point to discuss amongst the community to know what they want to know. Like the point that you've raised around advocacy council, and it's a great point. And the moment you share this out on LinkedIn and spread it out to other people in the community, it will inspire them to at least think about it, because maybe a lot of people are not even thinking about it, right? Everything starts with thinking about it before it turns into action. Maybe you've thought about it, but not everyone in the startup community might have thought about having an advocacy council. But maybe sharing such information out can allow them to think about it. And I think the more people think about it, the more the community thinks about it, it will automatically drive the politicians to think as well, because politicians just run on the base of the community and what really makes the community happy. If they hear that from more people in the community, only then they would be willing to take an action. Otherwise, if that's just an opinion of one or two people, they would just say, doesn't really matter, because we will still get elected. Yeah. What were you saying, Anne?
No, just that I was agreeing with what George was saying. Like my co-founder, I've got a business called Prime Life Partners, which is looking at longevity, because we're living longer and we're not going to have enough money in our super, blah, blah, blah. And Abby and I sort of talk about things. She's originally from the US and she's lived around the world. And when she was in the US, she met with this global insurance, it's called GIA, Global Insurance Accelerator. And riddle me this, George, they have a whole bunch of insurance companies, no chance in Australia, working together to support startups that are solving problems in fintech and insurtech.
Yep.
So they are the mentors, and they are contributing to this accelerator to foster better products.
Yep.
In insurance and in finance products. And I'm like, oh my God, like, when are we going to see this in Australia? Like, we've got the Insurance Industry Association, going to Silicon Valley to get excited about fintech there. So, you know what I mean? I can't really see anyone doing much here in the short while anyway, but that's what we need. We need that kind of approach, because we are so tiny. We are so tiny. How did we ever think that we could have 500 accelerators working on 500 things? Well, they're all failing.
So I'm actively involved with BNI, and BNI is the most successful business networking group in the world. Yeah. So one of the lawyers in my region decided that he would form a chat group with the lawyers in the region. So somebody said, well, why the hell would lawyers want to be in a chat group with one another? Because you're all, you're competing for work, and you're doing this and you're doing that. So what actually happened was they've exchanged ideas on cost savings. They've exchanged ideas on how do you do this and how do you do that with processing and CRMs and whatever. But the amount of work that's being exchanged from lawyer to lawyer, because we approach a particular lawyer and he says, well, look, I'm conflicted because I'm already representing Sarab. I can't represent you, Anne. And so he gets on the chat group and he says, I've got a client, blah, 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 blah. And so another lawyer now is looking after you. And then that lawyer will pass on work to Sarab for some other reason, or George, or whatever. It's about understanding that just because we're in the same pond, it doesn't necessarily mean that we all have to chase exactly the same fish. It doesn't.
And actually, I learned that decades ago from a guy called Joseph Asaf, who started the first multicultural marketing agency. And he was the very first, and he came from a printing background, and then he did this multicultural marketing thing. I think it was called Ethnic Communications, and it was very, very successful. And I said to him one day, aren't you upset that all these other people are coming up and creating the same thing? And he said to me, Anne-Marie, no, it's fantastic. And I said, why do you think it's fantastic? And he said, because I can only do one bank. I can't do all the banks. I can't do all the airlines. So welcome, they can come. And I thought, what a smart man. He was never threatened by it. He thought it was fantastic. And he welcomed it because, you can't, as commercial in confidence, you can't do all the banks. You can't do all the airlines or whatever. You can only do one. So that networking group is probably what we should be doing more broadly. And look, there's the Founders Institute, and there's now Community VC that's happening. So, we've actually got quite a few things like starting WhatsApp groups and bringing people together to start talking about, and people wanting to help other people, so it's happening. It's just been really slow in a country like Australia, where you'd think that would have happened a long time ago, because we are so tiny, less than 30 million people. We can do all of this. Like, it's really not hard. It's just not that hard. It's just that distance, yes, is an issue, but then we've got the internet now, right? So it's not hard for me to talk to someone in Taree or in London.
I think just a small habit as a part of the culture and the way you communicate to each other. One of the guys that joined me for a meetup walk, and I run a meetup group every Sunday afternoon. I do walks in and around city.
I love it. Let me know. I'd love to come.
Yeah, so I've been running the meetup group for around 2.5 years, and we've got around 2,500 members in the group now. And we also have a WhatsApp group for people who are regular joining. So what I've done is I've created a dedicated WhatsApp group. There are around 250 people in there as well. So there was a guy who joined me, and he said, I want to start like a volleyball group in Wollongong. What should I be doing? How can I have 2,500 members? I said, just keep on doing it.
That's right.
I never aspired to have 2,500 members, but I kept on doing it every week. So my walks are every Sunday. It's on my calendar every Sunday afternoon. People know there's a walk happening somewhere in the city. At 12, you have to land there. It can be Coogee to Bondi, Spit to Manly, Rose Bay to Watson's Bay, whatever that is. It's all on the Meetup app. It's all on the WhatsApp group. You can go and have a look at it.
You're amazing. And you are really amazing.
And people who are regular joinees didn't know about it. So I just told him, like, there is no shortcut. Just keep on doing it consistently. And you can only do it consistently if you enjoy doing it and if you're really passionate to do that. Otherwise, after a few months, you'll be like, nah, I'm just tired of doing it. I've never felt like it, even after 2.5 years, that I'm tired of doing it, because I just love it. I just love exploring new walks. I just love exploring those walks along the water because I love it. And look, and I think that's where the knowledge share comes in, that you just share knowledge from those little things, and that kind of translates into a big thing for them.
Yeah. And loneliness is really a major thing, like globally. And, I thought it was mainly around older people. It's everyone, like young people, it's migrants, it's refugees, it's teenagers, it's everyone, so creating opportunities, because everything is so online and distant, creating face-to-face opportunities is just amazing. I think it's so important, even for startup, right? Like, I don't want to say it, but I have to say it. People suicide in our community. And I heard about it through a co-working space that I won't mention that said, like, sometimes someone just never comes back, and you try and find them and call them and find out that they've suicided, so it's really sad. Like, we have to stick together. We have to show the community it is, probably one of the hardest journeys that we've chosen, but for whatever reason we've chosen it. And look, there's people like us that are there giving up our time because we want to help people. We want this to work in a country like Australia, so those things are really, really important, and we need to see more of them, because still a lot of it is not face to face. A lot of it is very distant.
Yeah, glad you talked about that, because one of the things that I always encourage people to do in the walks is ask the simple question of, are you okay? Because it's a very simple question of 3 words, but the impact it has on your mental health is significant. The moment you say genuinely somebody, are you okay? It's a different impact, because you showcase empathy, you showcase compassion. And I've seen that with so many people who just open up about themselves with me on the walk, and they'll be like, oh, I just had a breakup. Oh, I was in a bad relationship. Oh, I didn't have a really good week because of blah, blah, blah. Because you form a relationship with them in a very genuine way. The moment they see that, you're just asking them for the sake of asking, they would never share that with you. So I think that was something which I explored, and I was really, really keen on that once I saw that. But glad to chat with you, Anne. I'm really happy that this episode will give a lot of insights to people out there. And I hope to see you in person. Are you living in Sydney by any chance?
I live in Marrickville, man. I'm in the heart of, the area that has not yet been trendified. Because I was in Redfern for 20 years, and I saw that going from like a hoe place to, so over gentrified that, I tried to buy a place there, and like, honestly, like not even the size of my pinky toe could I find anything for less than $1 million. So, so I came here. I love it. It's just so the old, like, so there's like 2 Greek women, widows, and who have sons that still live with them, who are my age, who are across the road, and they know everything. They know everything. And then there's young people, and then there's the, all the Newtown folk. It's just so vibrant, but I can still go to a deli and get reasonable, Greek and Italian deli food that is beautiful and not ridiculously expensive. So, you know, I just love this place. And it, like I said, it hasn't yet been gentrified. I'm sure it's going to be in the long run. But, you know, I'm also doing a bit of work out in Southwest Sydney for UNSW founders. And one of the things that I see there is just how many migrants and refugees are underemployed. You know, so again, like we need to, as a community, get out there. And that was one of the things Annie, Nikki and I did with Tech4Gs, is we ran all the Tech4Gs events out in Southwest Sydney, in Blacktown, in Liverpool, in Bankstown, because we wanted to show the communities out there that we cared enough to step out of our areas.
Yep.
So yeah, more of that, please.
All right. Good to see you, Anne. And time to wrap up this exciting episode. And we will look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much. Lovely to meet you.
This is an Ultimate Global Podcast. Hello, and welcome to our special weekly podcast on trending international and social affairs. You're listening to Saurabh Kaura and George Mavros from Sydney.